Despicable fake tears at Bondi Beach.
Sussexes soap opera has rolled into town.
They're both lying. They're both lying to the Australian people and the world. That is the only conclusion. Meghan just turned a massacre site into an online shopping mall. And by the way, the whole life of profit thing ain't going too well, because Meghan embarrassingly turned up to the Her Best Life retreat, where the tickets failed to sell out. If you know anything about the truth of Meghan Markle, you know that this is a performance, it is highly scripted, and it is totally disingenuous.
The final day of the Australia tour ended with what many observers called the most intense and uncomfortable moment of the entire trip. And that says a lot, considering the tour had already been surrounded by ongoing controversy.
What Meghan is doing, it is, I believe, it's criminal. It's criminal to sell clothing, to sell your wares off of the backs of tragedy. Who would allow this, especially with your branding of the title? How can this even happen? I mean, there needs to be protections to the people who are being grifted.
On that last day in Sydney, Meghan visited Bondi Beach, a place linked to a serious 2024 incident at a nearby shopping center.
And I do want to remind you that when Meghan Markle and Prince Harry were in Jordan, they actually visited an organization connected to the Palestinians.
During the visit, she met survivors and families affected by the event. Photos showed her appearing emotional, and the atmosphere was clearly serious and heavy with meaning. But what happened next is what sparked the strongest reactions. Within just hours, the outfit she wore during that visit was listed for sale on an AI-powered retail platform reportedly connected to her.
Title that she is using, that she is trying to make money off of. I mean, that is something that needs to be, something needs to be done about it. There needs to be protections for the people who are taken advantage of.
Outside, there weren't too many people, but overall, I think they'll be looking at this as mission accomplished.
The timing immediately raised questions online. Writer Tom Sykes summarized the backlash, saying Meghan had effectively turned a tragedy-connected location into a shopping moment. He argued that monetizing something so close to a painful real-world event crosses a line.
Meghan was so conscious of the cameras, as Hans pointed out with this one. I'm bored. Are you done already? And look, so she's constantly doing the eye blink, looking for the light, looking for those images.
Not just socially, but on a basic human level. To be clear, the visit itself isn't what people are debating. The tragedy was real. The survivors' experiences are real. The family's grief is real. The focus of the criticism is what followed, and how quickly things shifted afterward. Because when a moment of support is followed almost immediately by commercial activity tied to it, the perception changes fast.
Will we get to see you back in Australia soon, Meghan? Oh gosh, we'd love to come back. It's brilliant.
Compassion and commerce start to overlap in a way that feels uncomfortable for many observers. And that becomes the image people remember most from the day. This also connects to a broader principle that has been referenced for years. At the Sandringham Summit, Queen Elizabeth II reportedly made a clear point. Public service should not be mixed with personal profit, not as a technical rule, but as a matter of meaning. Because once money and service overlap, the message behind the action starts to shift.
Public need to know that royals are carrying out engagements out of a sense of duty, not to provide window dressing for a lucrative foreign tour.
When a charitable visit is followed by business activity, the focus can change from helping people to managing image. And in that shift, the original purpose of the visit can feel less clear to outside observers.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are on their way home to the US tonight after their brief Australian tour, which royal watchers say achieved its monetary aim.
To sell her shitty clothing on stage at the not sold out Her Best Life retreat for just 122 minutes before deciding to be booed at the football alongside her husband, Prince Harry.
Earlier in the tour, similar situations were also discussed. An outfit worn during a hospital visit with children was later listed for sale. A similar pattern was also noted after a visit connected to veterans. By the time the Bondi Beach moment happened, some people were no longer seeing it as an isolated case. They saw a repeating pattern instead. By the end of the tour, that sense of pattern is what shaped the strongest reactions. And despite growing frustration reported in some circles, insiders say no major action is being taken at this stage.
In front of a couple of big names in the form of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, just checking in there with Phil Waugh. I believe John Eales is doing a little hosting for the evening as well, Morgs.
Reports suggest there are no active discussions about removing titles or changing official positions. The current approach appears to be focused on letting things settle and moving forward.
4 days in 2 cities, including paid appearances and more wardrobe changes than anyone can count. The Sussexes have redefined the line between business and pleasure.
Some sources close to the institution believe public opinion is already firmly formed, and reopening debates would only increase attention rather than resolve anything. One insider, previously connected to Queen Elizabeth II, was even more direct.
What I thought was really interesting on this tour is that somebody handed Meghan some flowers or something, and she immediately gave it to some sort of like lady-in-waiting character, as the Queen might do. You know, that's even Princess Anne doesn't do that.
Come the real issue exposed by the tour. At the Sandringham Summit, the concern was never just about roles or structure, it was about values. The core idea was simple: public service and personal profit should not sit side by side, because when they do, both start to lose clarity and meaning. That line wasn't just symbolic, it was drawn for a reason.
Why not go the whole hog and start selling jam crepes out of a trailer in the fucking car park? How wise the Queen was when she advised this foolish, impatient know-it-all.
Over time, that boundary has become less clear, and during this tour, critics argue it didn't just blur, it disappeared altogether. The repeated overlap between public appearances and commercial activity made the situation more visible than ever before. What also stands out is the silence around it. Choosing not to respond officially, not to clarify, and not to set visible boundaries sends a message of its own. And that message doesn't stay in the present. It shapes how future moments are interpreted too. Meanwhile, Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, are said to be watching developments closely.
Harry and Meghan balance paid appearances with charity causes in a royal visit unlike any before.
According to reports, there are quiet concerns about how sensitive public moments, especially those involving vulnerable people, may be perceived, and what that could mean long-term for the institution's reputation. William's position, as described in reports, has remained consistent and distant. He has shown no public alignment, and that stance appears unchanged for now. But the bigger question people are asking is whether that distance can realistically remain the same as responsibilities shift and future decisions become unavoidable. At the same time, the Her Best Life retreat added another layer to the overall discussion. Marketed as a premium wellness experience, it became one of the most commercially visible stops on the tour.
I actually found the whole thing incredibly awkward. I don't think Meghan Markle is good with children. And I think we see that time and time again, and this was another example of that.
Yeah, like I said, he's very good at twirling. Here we go.
Very good.
Great job. The most perfect dress to twirl in.
Meghan attended the event at the Intercontinental Coogee Beach location, but stayed for just over 2 hours before leaving to attend a rugby match with Harry. For attendees who paid significant amounts, that brief appearance immediately raised questions. While the event was described as sold out, some reports suggested availability was still being promoted shortly before it took place. Last-minute messaging encouraging ticket sales only added to the confusion and skepticism around the actual demand. Later that same day, at the New South Wales rugby match, the couple appeared on the big screen. But this time, the reaction felt different. Instead of the louder energy seen in earlier years, reports described a noticeably subdued crowd, with only scattered reactions and a quieter atmosphere overall.
That was beautiful, eh? Yeah, nice. See you there. I actually ran it.
By the end of the tour, it was no longer about isolated moments. It became a broader perception issue shaped by repetition, timing, and the growing gap between what was presented and how it was experienced on the ground. The crowd came for rugby, not for a headline moment. So when Harry and Meghan appeared on the big screen, the reaction felt muted, almost like a brief interruption rather than something the audience was waiting for. It didn't land as a major moment. It just came and went. Shortly after, cameras captured a more personal moment between them. Photos showed a kiss, an embrace, and hand-holding, the kind of imagery that tends to surface at key points during the tour. Observers noted that these moments can feel very intentional, almost positioned at the right time to shift attention. Those visuals do a clear job. They project unity, closeness, and stability at a time when public discussion is often divided. And just as importantly, they redirect focus. When these softer images circulate, attention moves away from criticism.
Every day for 10 years, I have been bullied and attacked, and I was the most trolled person in the entire world, man or woman.
She, on a daily basis, trolls us.
Away from retreat debates, outfit resale discussions, and earlier backlash, and towards something more positive and human. Throughout the tour, Meghan's interactions with children also became a point of discussion. At hospital visits and public walkabouts, some observers described certain moments as slightly awkward or structured. One former teacher, after reviewing footage, pointed to a specific detail, ending interactions while a child was still trying to continue the moment.
There were awfully cringe moments where we saw the real Meghan Markle, where she became visibly frustrated with a young boy. But as Hans pointed out, we love posing with other kids, but will not show our kids' faces hypocrite award.
That observation stood out because it reflects a known communication style in public settings. From that perspective, it suggests closure is being signaled by the adult side, even if the child is still engaged. Critics describe it as efficient and controlled, with interactions moving on quickly once their purpose is complete.
And Harry should zip it too, by the way, with his constant attempt to rewrite history when it comes to his mother, Princess Diana.
At the same time, others draw a comparison with Catherine, Princess of Wales, not as criticism, but as a contrast in approach. Catherine is often seen lowering herself to a child's eye level, staying engaged and responding in a way that feels more back and forth. Children tend to respond strongly to that style, often staying engaged longer and more naturally. That kind of interaction is difficult to stage. It usually reflects real-time connection, and it comes across clearly on camera, whether planned or not.
This is the moment where she's really commercializing herself. She wants to be a lifestyle brand. She's using the name Duchess, and we saw her introduced as the Duchess of Sussex.
Another layer comes from reporting by Richard Eden, who has followed conversations about a possible return to public life in the UK. According to his reporting, there are concerns within circles close to Prince William and Catherine about what tours like this could signal in the long term. The concern isn't just about visibility, it's about direction. Some view public engagements as something rooted in duty and institutional purpose, rather than something that overlaps with commercial activity or branding. That distinction is seen as important for how the role is understood. There are also wider discussions and speculation within British political and institutional circles about possible future arrangements or reintegration scenarios.
And apparently, Meghan, quote, hated every single minute of that trip. So here they are, 8 years later, they've returned back to Australia for goodness knows what reason. And all I can put it down to be honest, is that they need money.
Names such as Boris Johnson have been mentioned in commentary and speculation, alongside other unnamed figures who may support different outcomes. Whether that idea has real momentum or not is still unclear. But the fact that it's being talked about at all shows how much the situation has shifted and how the conversation is no longer just about one tour, but about what might come next. One growing concern that keeps coming up is control. Right now, the Sussex brand continues to operate across multiple Commonwealth-linked spaces without direct institutional oversight. And after this tour, that reality has become harder for some observers to overlook.
Why are Harry and Meghan visiting a hospital when they are on a commercial visit to Australia? They're not working royals. They should not be using charity to muddy the waters in the hope that these money-grubbing hustlers will be mistaken for individuals who care about charity.
Some insiders are beginning to frame the situation differently. If a half-in, half-out style model is already happening in practice, then the question shifts. Not whether it exists in theory, but whether it should be formally managed. Because from this perspective, what the Australia tour demonstrated is simple. Public activity is already happening, regardless of structure. The argument being discussed is fairly direct. A loosely defined return with some structure could, in theory, be easier to manage than a completely independent approach with no formal boundaries. Without that kind of framework, every decision is made privately, without traditional institutional limits or shared accountability. Whether something like a quiet Operation Thaw is actually coordinated or not remains unclear. It could be structured planning, or it could simply be different voices arriving at similar conclusions. But what is clear is the effect the tour had. It intensified the discussion. Everything proceeded as planned during the trip. The hospital visits took place, memorial moments were observed, public appearances were carried out, and later, commercial-related activity followed. Throughout all of it, there was no visible institutional intervention or pushback. That silence itself becomes part of the story.
Crawling back to the public consciousness by doing all the things she complained about when she was in the royal family. It makes no sense.
Because when nothing is stopped or addressed publicly, it still sends a signal. Permission doesn't always need to be spoken. Sometimes it is interpreted through inaction, and that quiet space becomes the foundation for whatever direction comes next. Even the reaction at the rugby match reflected something similar. There was no strong backlash, no loud rejection, just a calm, almost neutral response. People watched, reacted briefly, and moved on. That kind of quiet reaction can be read in different ways. Some see it as indifference, others see it as acceptance, and others interpret it as people simply forming their own conclusions without needing to react outwardly. This is exactly the kind of outcome Queen Elizabeth II reportedly worked for decades to avoid. Her position, especially reflected in discussions around the Sandringham Summit, centered on one core principle: public service and commercial activity should remain separate. That boundary mattered because it defined the meaning of the role. Once that line becomes less clear, the purpose itself starts to shift. And public service can begin to look more like presentation than duty. For many observers, that is the broader pattern this tour brought into focus. Not just isolated moments, but the way emotional public appearances and later commercial activity appear close together in timing, shaping how the entire sequence is perceived. Meanwhile, Prince William is said to be paying close attention. Concerns described by some insiders as extremely dangerous for the monarchy reflect a deeper worry, that something important is slowly being eroded, and fixing it later may not be simple.
Meghan's doing what she does best, making everything about herself. Everything. Everything relates to her. But back to me. Enough about me. What do you think of me?
There's also a growing sense that future decisions may not follow the same passive approach. While things appear calm now, that doesn't guarantee it stays that way. When responsibility shifts, responses often shift with it. By the end of the tour, the details started to speak for themselves. The retreat appearance was brief, clothing listings continued, and public reaction stayed relatively muted. Together, it created a message that many felt became clearer with every step. Even moments meant to be emotional sparked debate. Meghan's visible reaction at Bondi Beach, for example, didn't just draw sympathy. It also led to questions from analysts, media voices, and viewers about whether the emotion felt fully natural or more structured. That debate itself is important. It reflects a shift in public perception over time, from immediate trust to hesitation, and from simple reactions to deeper analysis. And that shift may end up being just as significant as anything that actually happened during the tour.
Ask them, how would you like me to address you? Now, remember, this is Meghan Markle, a woman who demands that when she's entering a room at an empty friend's apartment, that she is announced as the Duchess of Sussex. And Harry, we know how much he cares about his title, so he shrugged. Apparently, he just shrugged and said, however you like. In other words, you call us by our goddamn titles.
This situation didn't appear suddenly. It's not just online noise or short-term media reaction. What people are reacting to now is a pattern built over time, one that makes it harder for some to clearly separate genuine emotion from carefully managed presentation. And that uncertainty is becoming the central issue. A past example often mentioned is the visit to Uvalde, Texas, after the Robb Elementary School shooting. Meghan arrived quietly, placed flowers, and the images quickly spread worldwide. At first, it appeared to be a private gesture of respect, but questions followed soon after. Whether the visit was fully spontaneous or more carefully coordinated, and whether the focus was on families or on public perception. Those questions never fully disappeared. Now, looking at Bondi Beach, critics say the pattern feels more noticeable. Emotional appearances followed closely by commercial activity make it harder for some to separate intention from outcome, because even if the emotion itself is genuine, it doesn't automatically remove the discomfort people feel when it is followed by commercial tie-ins. And that's where the criticism becomes sharper. It's less about titles or roles and more about judgment. Many people feel that promoting an outfit connected to a tragedy-linked location sends a message that places commerce too close to grief. something a lot of viewers find uneasy. Another layer comes from the earlier trip to Jordan. During that visit, photos showed Harry and Meghan meeting representatives linked to organizations that had shared controversial political messaging online. Those details were reported at the time, but there was no clear public response that followed.
Well, Harry and Meghan are in the country, and here at the Late Debate, we've got exclusive footage of their arrival in this country. And I think we can all agree that's all that needs to be said.
Shortly after, there was also a visit to a memorial site connected to a separate tragedy, presented with visible emotion. For some observers, that contrast raised questions. Even if it wasn't widely discussed in local coverage, it still added to the broader debate. Media coverage itself became part of the story. Some outlets with closer access presented the tour in a positive light, while critics argued that the tone didn't always match what people were actually seeing or reacting to on the ground. One moment that drew attention involved a correspondent suggesting a heavy police presence was simply routine, even as some viewers pointed to visible signs that seemed more significant. That kind of framing stood out, especially when compared with more neutral eyewitness accounts. Journalist Emily Andrews noted that something similar was seen back in 2018, when coverage was largely positive even as some reporters sensed underlying tension. The difference now is that the gap between media framing and public reaction feels much wider. On the ground, responses have been mixed, sometimes quiet, sometimes uncertain. And that contrast between polished reporting and subdued reaction has become harder for some to ignore. Looking ahead, attention shifts to the UK. A potential return or extended visit would likely be viewed in a very different environment. There is still some level of support for Harry, as observers have noted, but it's not as strong or simple as before. It feels softer, more divided, and more complex. That makes the next phase harder to predict, because for the first time, reactions may be shaped less by headlines and more by how much trust still remains. The response in Britain is expected to differ from Australia. Australians mostly saw Harry and Meghan through a single major tour in 2018, so they compared this new version to that memory. But in the UK, people have followed Harry's life much longer. From his military service to the Invictus Games and the earlier public image that felt more familiar. That long history changes perception. For some, the story is about change, the shift from a relatable public figure to someone more complex and harder to interpret. And that's where opinions split most clearly. Some still see the earlier version, while others feel that version has faded. The warning from Prince William's circle, described as extremely dangerous for the monarchy, points to what they see as the core issue. Because this isn't only about image, it's about trust in how the system works. The monarchy's value depends on public confidence that engagements are rooted in duty, not commercial overlap.
They didn't go first class. Well, I can tell you a couple of things. First of all, they're flat broke and they have to save money. Secondly, there was no first class. How the mighty have fallen. They are having to rough it in ordinary business class, which, let me tell you, Meghan hates because she doesn't like to meet ordinary people.
That trust supports everything from global influence to charitable impact. And once that clarity becomes less certain, the foundation itself starts to feel less stable. And the shift doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, over time, through repeated moments where the boundary becomes less clear. When serious public events and commercial activity start to sit close together, and even indirectly now, the perception doesn't change instantly, but it does change steadily. King Charles III's approach so far appears cautious. And on a personal level, that's understandable. Family relationships are complicated, and public disagreement brings its own pressure. Constant media attention, commentary, and ongoing scrutiny. But while avoiding confrontation may ease short-term tension, it doesn't remove the longer-term effects. The structure remains in place, titles remain, and public roles still exist within the same broader framework. At the same time, the Sussex brand continues operating in a space that still connects back to the institution in public perception. That connection carries weight. It provides visibility and credibility, even as criticism continues. And without a clear institutional response, the situation doesn't settle. It keeps moving forward and evolving. Each public appearance that overlaps with commercial elements adds another layer. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's more visible. But it's enough to keep the conversation active and the same question coming back again and again. Where is the line now? For decades, Queen Elizabeth II worked to keep that line clearly defined. Through crises, public pressure, and internal challenges, she maintained a consistent approach. Not because it was easy, but because it shaped the identity of the role itself. At the Sandringham Summit, that principle was reportedly made very clear. The focus wasn't just on managing a situation, it was on protecting a standard, that public service and personal gain should remain separate to preserve meaning and trust. What is being discussed now goes beyond individual decisions. It's about whether that underlying principle is still being upheld in practice. Because once that principle becomes less clear, the impact extends far beyond one event or one tour. It starts to change how every future action is interpreted. And that's why the concern keeps returning to the same core idea. Not procedures, not titles, but the long-term meaning of public service and whether it is still clearly understood. Emotional storytelling, commercial activity, and institutional silence, those three elements now sit at the center of how the situation is viewed.
This is where Diana crushed, and she thinks she's Diana, so she's back there.
Geez. And while Prince William may eventually be in a position to respond more directly, that moment has not arrived yet. For now, the institution remains quiet, and past warnings continue to be referenced as the situation develops. The Australia tour may have ended, but its impact continues. The final images, Bondi Beach, the subdued stadium reaction, the short retreat appearance, and the "I'd love to come back" comment, left a lasting impression, not because of one moment, but because of how all those moments connected together. At the center of everything is a simple but serious issue. A system that tries to blend public service with personal business becomes unstable over time. And what was once theory is now something people are pointing to in real situations. The Sussex operation, as it is often described, relies heavily on its connection to the royal institution. That connection creates visibility, drives attention, and helps support the value of projects like retreats and partnerships. Without that association, the same level of reach and interest would be much harder to achieve. But that's where the tension begins, because the more that connection is used in commercial contexts, the more pressure it puts on the meaning behind it. Each time a public visit is followed by a product listing or business activity, the perception shifts. At first, people question it. Then they start noticing a pattern, and eventually expectations change completely. Now, many observers no longer view these appearances on their own. A hospital visit, a memorial moment, or a charity engagement doesn't just stand alone. It risks being seen as part of a wider cycle involving image and commerce. That shift is important because the original value of those moments came from trust. The belief was that they were genuine acts of support. Once that trust starts to weaken, everything connected to it becomes harder to separate. There are also real-world implications. The people involved in these moments, families, patients, and communities, can become part of a much larger public narrative. And that raises ongoing questions about focus, intention, and impact. At the same time, the institution itself faces a growing challenge. It still provides the symbolic weight that makes these appearances meaningful, but without clear boundaries, that same influence can start to feel stretched. This is exactly the kind of risk Queen Elizabeth II reportedly worked to avoid, especially around discussions like the Sandringham Summit. Her focus wasn't only structure, it was protecting the long-term meaning of public service. Right now, that meaning is being tested. There are already signs of strain in how things are perceived, from shifting demand for events, to adjustments in pricing, to changing partnerships. Whether the Australia tour accelerates or slows those trends is something that will only become clear with time. What is clear, however, is the cost, not just in perception, but in how the system is being used and interpreted. Across different voices, commentators, insiders, and public reactions, a similar theme keeps appearing. Something important is becoming less distinct. And once that line fully fades, restoring it becomes significantly harder. The tour has ended. The moments have passed, but the overall record remains, and together it tells a clear story about choices, consequences, and the impact of repeated decisions over time.